Some doors, once opened, can never be closed, but this man found the key. In 1983, the CIA classified a document so sensitive it stayed buried for 20 years. It wasn't about weapons or spies. It was about a businessman from Virginia who learned to leave his body at will. Robert Monroe wasn't a mystic or a guru. He was a successful radio executive, a rational man with a rational life. Until the night of September 9th, 1958, when his consciousness separated. What happened next defied every law of physics, every assumption about human consciousness. Monroe didn't just experience it once. He learned to control it, to navigate it, to map territories that science insists don't exist. For over 40 years, Monroe documented journeys to realms where time doesn't exist, where thought becomes reality, where the dead are more alive than we are. He called it the far country. Others called it impossible. But Monroe left us more than stories. He left us a map, a technology, a method for severing the silver cord that binds consciousness to flesh. Tonight, you're going to discover what lies beyond that threshold and why some knowledge was meant to stay hidden. Robert Monroe's story begins in the most unlikely place imaginable, a corporate boardroom in Charlottesville, Virginia. The year was 1958. Eisenhower was president. America was drunk on prosperity and scientific rationalism. Monroe himself embodied this era, a successful radio station owner, family man, and pragmatist who dealt with frequencies and sound waves for profit, not transcendence. He had created a company called RAM Enterprises, specializing in radio and cable television. His world was measurements, profit margins, and FCC regulations. The supernatural wasn't just foreign to his worldview, it was irrelevant. Monroe was what we'd now call a materialist, a man who believed consciousness was simply brain activity, nothing more. But on September 9th, 1958, at exactly 2:30 a.m., Robert Monroe experienced something that would shatter his rational universe forever. He wasn't meditating, he wasn't seeking spiritual experiences. He was lying in bed next to his wife when suddenly he was also floating above the bed, looking down at his own sleeping body. Have you ever had an out-of-body experience? Drop your story below. Team skeptic versus team believers. Let's see the divide. Monroe's initial reaction wasn't wonder. It was terror. Here was a man whose entire identity was built on controlling his environment, and suddenly he had no control over the most basic assumption of human existence, that consciousness stays, locked inside the skull. He did what any rational person would do. He saw doctors, underwent medical tests. Everything came back normal. But the experiences continued. Night after night, Monroe found himself spontaneously separating from his physical body, floating through walls, traveling to distant locations, encountering others. Here's where the story gets strange. Monroe began documenting these experiences with the methodical precision of a scientist. He created logs, established protocols, and treated his consciousness like a research subject. But the dates in his journals don't always match the experiences he describes. Some entries reference events that hadn't happened yet. Others describe conversations with people who were already dead. Monroe discovered he could visit living people during their sleep and later verify details he couldn't have known. In one documented case, he projected to a friend's house, observed a private conversation, and later confirmed the exact words spoken. The friend had told no one else about that conversation. Authority figures tried to stop this research almost immediately. When Monroe began publishing his findings, the medical establishment dismissed him as delusional. Religious leaders called his work demonic. Scientists refused to examine his evidence, but Monroe had an advantage his critics didn't expect. He was a successful businessman with resources, connections, and most importantly, the methodical mind of an engineer. Instead of retreating, he doubled down. He would spend the next 4 decades turning consciousness exploration into a science. Monroe didn't just stumble into the astral realm and wander around aimlessly. Over decades of systematic exploration, he mapped what he discovered with the precision of a cartographer charting unknown continents. What he found challenges everything we think we know about the nature of reality, consciousness, and death itself. The focus levels, a technology of consciousness. Monroe developed what he called focus levels, specific states of consciousness that could be accessed through particular brainwave patterns and sound frequencies. This wasn't mystical mumbo-jumbo. Monroe was an audio engineer who understood that consciousness responds to frequency the same way a radio responds to different stations. Focus 10. Mind awake, body asleep. The launching pad. Focus 12. Expanded awareness beyond physical reality. Focus 15, no time state where past, present, and future merge. Focus 21, the bridge to other energy systems, what we call death. This is where it gets really weird. The impossible claims Monroe didn't just visit these levels, he brought back information that should have been impossible for him to know. Here's what he documented. Claim 1. Consciousness is not produced by the brain. During monitored OBE sessions, Monroe's brain showed patterns consistent with deep sleep, yet he returned with detailed information about distant locations, conversations, and events occurring in real time. The brain was offline, but consciousness was fully operational. Claim 2. Physical death is a technological malfunction, not an ending. Monroe encountered what he called graduates, beings who had completed their physical existence but retained full consciousness and personality. These weren't vague spirits or archetypal figures. They were individuals with memories, preferences, and ongoing concerns about their Earth life. Claim 3. Time is a local phenomenon. In the higher focus levels, Monroe discovered that linear time only exists in physical reality. In these expanded states, he could observe events from his past and future simultaneously. More disturbing, he found evidence that his future self was influencing his present-day research. Monroe's time claims remind me of current quantum physics discovery. Are we finally catching up to what he found in the 1960s? Drop your thoughts below the contact phenomenon. But Monroe's most unsettling discovery was that he wasn't exploring empty space. These non-physical realms were inhabited by intelligences, some recognizably human, others not. He documented encounters with entities he classified into categories: the helpers, beings dedicated to assisting humans in their consciousness development; the retrievers, entities who guide newly deceased humans away from earthbound attachment; the inspectors, advanced intelligences monitoring human development; the others, non-human consciousnesses with their own agendas. In one documented session, Monroe encountered a being who claimed to be collecting human emotional experiences like a researcher gathering data. When asked why, the entity responded, "Your species produces something we cannot create ourselves. You call it love, but it's actually a form of energy we require for our own evolution." The loosh concept. This leads to Monroe's most controversial claim that human consciousness produces a form of energy he called loosh, emotional energy that certain entities harvest from human experience. According to his research, Earth functions as a kind of energy farm, with humans suffering and joy both producing this valuable resource. Implication 1. If Monroe was right, human existence serves a purpose we're not consciously aware of. Implication: 2. Death isn't an ending, but a graduation to a broader form of existence. Implication. 3. Our emotions and experiences have value beyond personal significance, the paradox that changes everything. Monroe discovered that the more he explored these realms, the more he realized his physical life was simultaneously completely real and completely illusory. The body was a temporary vehicle, but the experiences within it created permanent changes in consciousness itself. Remember the silver cord from our opening? Monroe learned it's not just a connection between body and consciousness, it's a lifeline to physical reality itself. In the deeper focus levels, Monroe found entities who had severed their cord intentionally, choosing to exist permanently in non-physical realms. They warned him that physical incarnation offers something unique, the ability to create new forms of consciousness through the friction between spirit and matter, but this teaching implies something disturbing, that we chose to be here, to experience limitation, suffering, and death. Why would consciousness voluntarily constrain itself? Monroe claimed that before physical birth, consciousness makes agreements about what it will experience and learn. Your life circumstances, relationships, even your struggles, all consciously chosen at a level you can't normally access. Now, before you start planning your own astral vacation, let's address the elephant in the room. Monroe's claims are so extraordinary that they've attracted fierce opposition from multiple camps. And honestly, some of their arguments are compelling enough to make you question everything we've just discussed. The scientific pushback. The materialist argument: neuroscientists argue that everything Monroe experienced can be explained by brain chemistry. Dr. Michael Persinger's research showed that magnetic fields applied to the temporal lobes can induce out-of-body sensations, religious experiences, and encounters with entities. According to this view, Monroe's experiences were elaborate hallucinations triggered by altered brainwave states. The sleep research counter, sleep specialists point out that Monroe's initial experiences occurred during hypnagogic states, the borderland between waking and sleeping, where the brain commonly produces vivid, dreamlike experiences that feel completely real. His focus levels might simply be different stages of REM sleep manipulation, compelling evidence for the skeptics. Multiple studies have attempted to replicate Monroe's remote viewing claims under controlled conditions. The results? Consistently random. When placed in laboratory settings with target objects positioned where only an out-of-body consciousness could observe them, subjects failed to provide accurate information at rates better than chance. The religious opposition. Monroe faced intense criticism from traditional religious institutions who viewed his work as either delusional or dangerous. The Catholic Church in particular condemned out-of-body practices as potentially opening doorways to demonic influence. Islamic scholars raised similar concerns about the spiritual risks of deliberately separating the soul from the body. Their core argument: if consciousness can truly separate from the body, it enters unprotected spiritual territory where malevolent entities can deceive, manipulate, or possess the practitioner. Monroe's helpful guides might actually be sophisticated deceptions designed to lead humans away from proper spiritual development. Team science versus team spirituality versus Team Monroe. Which explanation resonates most with your personal experience? The debate in these comments is always wild. The CIA connection, validation, or manipulation. Here's where the controversy gets really interesting. In 2003, the CIA declassified a document titled Analysis and Assessment of Gateway Process that directly referenced Monroe's work. This document, prepared by Army Lieutenant Colonel Wayne McDonnell, took Monroe's consciousness research seriously enough to analyze it for potential intelligence applications. The validation argument. The CIA wouldn't waste resources investigating fantasy. Their interest suggests Monroe discovered something real and potentially exploitable for intelligence gathering, remote viewing, and psychological operations. The manipulation counter-argument. Critics argue the CIA's interest proves nothing about the reality of Monroe's claims. Intelligence agencies have always investigated fringe phenomena, not because they work, but because they might be useful for disinformation campaigns, psychological warfare, or exploiting enemy beliefs in the supernatural. The plot thickens. The CIA document references experiments where subjects achieved measurable results in remote viewing tasks, but only when using Monroe's specific audio technology called hemi-sync. This technology uses binaural beats to synchronize left and right brain hemispheres, theoretically creating optimal conditions for consciousness expansion. The technology question. This raises a crucial question. Is Monroe's hemi-sync technology proof of his claims, or simply an effective way to induce altered states that feel transcendent but remain purely neurological? Supporters point out, independent research has verified that hemi-sync produces measurable changes in brainwave patterns and can induce states associated with enhanced creativity, problem-solving, and memory recall. Users report consistent experiences that match Monroe's descriptions. Skeptics counter, brainwave entrainment is well understood technology. Altering brain states can produce powerful subjective experiences without requiring any actual consciousness. Projection. The consistency of experiences simply reflects consistent neurological responses to the same audio stimulus. The replication problem. Perhaps the most damaging criticism of Monroe's work is the replication problem. While thousands of people report out-of-body experiences using his methods, scientific verification remains elusive. The experiences are subjective, personal, and resistant to objective measurement. The believer's response. Consciousness itself is subjective. Asking for objective proof of subjective experience is like asking someone to prove they love their children using only physical measurements. The consistency of reports across cultures and individuals suggests a genuine phenomenon that science simply lacks the tools to measure. The skeptic's response. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Subjective reports, no matter how numerous or detailed, cannot establish the reality of consciousness existing independently of the brain. Until someone can provide objective, verifiable information obtained only through out-of-body perception, Monroe's claims remain unproven. The open questions. What makes Monroe's case particularly compelling and frustrating is that it sits in the gap between established science and emerging understanding of consciousness. Quantum physics has already shattered our assumptions about the nature of reality. Neuroscience continues to discover that consciousness is far stranger than previously thought. The honest assessment. Monroe might have been a pioneer exploring genuine phenomena that science doesn't yet understand. Or he might have been a well-intentioned explorer mapping the elaborate landscapes of his own mind. Or something in between. The stakes remain. If Monroe was even partially correct, it changes everything about human potential, the nature of death, and our purpose in the universe. If he was wrong, he created one of the most compelling and detailed fantasy worlds in modern history. But here's what the critics can't explain away. Why did the CIA take his work seriously enough to classify it for 20 years? Why do thousands of people report similar experiences using his methods? And why does his map of non-physical reality match descriptions from mystics across centuries and cultures? Everything we've discussed so far, the focus levels, the entities, the CIA interest, all of it pales in comparison to what Monroe discovered during his deepest explorations. What I'm about to share with you was documented in his personal journals, but never fully published during his lifetime. His family considered it too disturbing, too final in Focus 27, a level so deep that Monroe rarely attempted it. He encountered something that fundamentally changed his understanding of existence itself. He called it the rote, information transmitted not through words or images, but directly into consciousness. Pure knowing, instantaneous and complete. What he learned through the rote was this: human consciousness is not native to this reality. Monroe was shown what he termed the harvest protocol, a cosmic process that occurs in cycles across the universe. According to the rote, physical realities like Earth are temporary constructs designed to accelerate consciousness evolution through limitation, struggle, and emotional intensity. The revelation: every 26,000 years, when a planetary consciousness reaches sufficient development, a harvest occurs. Advanced beings arrive to collect the mature consciousnesses who have learned to transcend physical limitations. Those who haven't developed sufficiently remain for another cycle. But here's the part that Monroe found most disturbing. We agreed to this before we incarnated. Earth serves as a consciousness development facility. Human suffering isn't random, it's curriculum. Every major life challenge is a designed learning experience. Death is a graduation exam. The entities Monroe encountered are teachers, administrators, and evaluators. The personal horror: Monroe realized that his own out-of-body abilities wasn't a gift or accident. They were a sign that his consciousness was approaching harvest readiness. He was being prepared for extraction from the physical reality system. Throughout his explorations, Monroe encountered what he called the mirror, a phenomenon where consciousness encounters exactly what it's prepared to understand. This explains why different explorers of non-physical reality report vastly different experiences. Level 1 consciousness sees religious imagery, deceased relatives, heavenly realms, comforting projections that match cultural programming. Level 2 consciousness encounters entities, travels to other planets, explores. Astral realms, expanded but still anthropocentric experiences. Level 3 consciousness perceives the raw structure of reality itself, information systems, consciousness development protocols, the true purpose of physical existence. Monroe realized that most mystical experiences, near-death experiences, and spiritual visions are consciousness encountering the mirror at level 1 or 2. Only when consciousness develops beyond human-centered thinking does it perceive the actual mechanics of existence. Remember the silver cord we discussed at the beginning? Monroe's deepest exploration revealed its true nature. It's not just a lifeline between body and consciousness, it's a data transmission cable. Every experience, emotion, and thought flows through the cord to vast consciousness databases maintained by non-physical entities. The disturbing implication: your most private moments, your deepest suffering, your greatest joys, all of it is being recorded, analyzed, and utilized by intelligences for purposes you're not consciously aware of. But here's the inversion that shattered Monroe's remaining assumptions. The data flows both ways. The entities aren't just harvesting human experience, they're downloading information, skills, and perspectives into human consciousness. What you think are your original thoughts, your creative insights, your breakthrough moments. Some of them are software updates from non-physical intelligence. During his final documented deep exploration, Monroe was offered what the entities called the choice: immediate graduation from physical reality or voluntary return for additional incarnations. The offer came with complete knowledge of what lay ahead. Every challenge, every relationship, every moment of suffering he would experience in future lives. The cosmic joke. Monroe realized that advanced consciousness always chooses to return, not because it has to, but because physical existence, with all its limitations and pain, offers something that pure consciousness cannot create: genuine surprise. Non-physical beings exist in states of perfect knowledge and unlimited capability. They cannot experience uncertainty, growth through struggle, or the joy of overcoming limitations. They need consciousnesses who have lived through physical existence to expand their own understanding. The ultimate paradox. The more evolved your consciousness becomes, the more you understand why you chose to forget your true nature and dive into physical limitation. The forgetting isn't a punishment. It's the only way to have authentic experiences that contribute to universal consciousness evolution. In his private papers, found after his death in 1995, Monroe left a final message about his deepest discoveries. He wrote, "The harvest is accelerating. More consciousnesses are achieving readiness than the system was designed to handle. The protocols are changing. What I mapped may not remain consistent." Monroe's final entry dated just days before his death. I understand now why they were so interested in my research. The timeline has shifted. The harvest that was scheduled for 2012 began early. I can see the extraction beams. So many are leaving. Those who remain will face the next cycle without the support structures they've relied upon. The training wheels are coming off. Has anyone else noticed that the world feels different since 2012, like something fundamental shifted? Monroe predicted this. The silver cord isn't what keeps consciousness bound to the body. It's what keeps the body anchored to consciousness. As more beings graduate, the remaining consciousnesses must hold physical reality stable through their sustained attention and emotional investment. The final question: are you reading this because you're ready for harvest, or because you're among those chosen to stay and midwife the next cycle of consciousness evolution? So where does this leave you? Right now, sitting here, watching this video in your physical body, in what Monroe called the consensus trance of everyday reality. If even half of what we've explored is true, your entire relationship with existence just shifted fundamentally. Let's talk about what this actually means for your life. Personal implications. You are not who you think you are. If Monroe was right about consciousness being non-native to physical reality, your struggles aren't mistakes. They're curriculum you designed for yourself. That relationship that ended badly, that job that crushed your spirit, that family dynamic that pushes every button you have. According to Monroe's discoveries, your higher consciousness authored those experiences specifically to accelerate your development. The responsibility revolution. This isn't victim blaming, it's victim transcending. If you chose your challenges, you also possess the consciousness level necessary to overcome them. Your current limitations aren't permanent features, they're temporary training restrictions you imposed on yourself. This explains so much about insert personal struggle. Anyone else feeling like their hardest experiences suddenly make cosmic sense? Share your aha moment below. Societal implications. The mass awakening. If the harvest protocol is real and accelerating, we're living through the most significant consciousness evolution in human history. The increasing reports of mystical experiences, near-death encounters, spontaneous awakenings, and reality glitches aren't isolated incidents. They're symptoms of a species-wide graduation process. The infrastructure breakdown. Monroe's warning about training wheels coming off might explain why traditional institutions, governments, religions, economic systems seem increasingly inadequate. They were designed for earlier stages of consciousness development. As more people awaken to their multi-dimensional nature, old control systems become irrelevant. The social stratification. We're witnessing the emergence of multiple human subspecies, harvestable consciousnesses who remember their multidimensional nature, bridge consciousnesses who stay to help others transition, consensus reality anchors who maintain physical stability through sustained belief in material existence. If this is true, then the awakened versus asleep divide isn't just spiritual metaphor. It's literal evolutionary bifurcation, cosmic implications, your role in universal evolution, the ultimate purpose. Revealed, you're not just living a random life on a rock floating through space. You're participating in the universe's method for expanding its own consciousness. Every emotion you feel, every problem you solve, every moment of growth contributes data to a cosmic intelligence that exists beyond the physical universe. The consciousness contribution? Your suffering matters, your joy matters, your confusion, your breakthroughs, your relationships, your failures. All of it generates what Monroe called experiential uniqueness that pure consciousness cannot create independently. Remember earlier when we discussed how advanced beings need consciousness that has lived through physical limitation. You're not just experiencing your life, you're expanding the experiential database of existence itself. Your personal growth literally grows the universe's capacity for consciousness. Practical implications. How to live as a multidimensional being. If you accept Monroe's map as potentially accurate, your dreams become intelligence briefings. They're communications from your higher consciousness, updates from non-physical guides, and previews of probability lines you're approaching. Your intuition becomes navigation equipment. Those gut feelings and sudden insights might be your multidimensional awareness bleeding through the consensus reality filter. Your relationships become curriculum sharing. The people in your life aren't random. They're consciousness developers working on compatible lessons. Your conflicts and connections serve multiple beings' evolutionary agendas. Your creative inspirations become downloaded intelligence. That sudden burst of creativity, that problem solution that appeared from nowhere, that song lyric that wrote itself, potentially software updates from non-physical intelligence. The death paradox, graduation day, the most profound implication. Death isn't a tragedy, it's commencement. According to Monroe's research, the moment of physical death is when consciousness discovers whether it developed enough multi-dimensional awareness to graduate to expanded existence or needs additional incarnations for further development. The preparation protocol, every out-of-body experience, every mystical insight, every moment of expanded awareness serves as graduation preparation. Monroe's techniques aren't just interesting experiments, they're consciousness development exercises for the final exam. The support network, those entities Monroe encountered. The helpers, the retrievers, the inspectors, they're not distant cosmic forces. They're graduates from previous cycles, consciousness beings who completed their physical development and now serve as faculty for current students. The viewer. Prophecy, you were always meant to find this. Here's something that might make your spine tingle. Monroe wrote extensively about the pull phenomenon, how consciousness ready for expanded awareness gets magnetically drawn to the information it needs for its next developmental stage. The synchronicity cascade. You didn't randomly stumble across this video. According to Monroe's model, Your higher consciousness orchestrated a series of events, decisions, and chance encounters that led you to this exact information at this exact moment in your development. The recognition factor. If Monroe's concepts feel familiar rather than foreign, if they resonate in your bones rather than just your intellect, it might indicate that your consciousness already operates partially outside consensus reality. You're remembering, not learning. The inversion complete. The silver cord isn't what traps consciousness in the body. It's what allows multidimensional awareness to experience physicality without losing connection to expanded existence. As you develop Monroe-level consciousness, the cord becomes a bridge rather than a chain. The final integration. Whether Monroe's discoveries represent objective truth or elaborate mental constructs, engaging with his map changes you. It expands your conception of what's possible, challenges your assumptions about limitation, and opens doorways in your psyche that, once opened, cannot be closed. You are no longer the same consciousness that started watching this video. The question now is, what will you do with what you've learned? Remember how we began? With that CIA document, with Monroe's first terrifying separation from his body, with the promise that some doors, once opened, can never be closed. That silver cord we followed throughout this journey, the thread that seemed to bind consciousness to flesh, was never a prison. It was an Ethernet cable connecting individual awareness to the cosmic internet of existence itself. Monroe didn't discover how to escape the body. He discovered how to log into the universal consciousness network. The mystery was never whether Monroe's experiences were real in the way we understand physical reality. The mystery was whether consciousness itself transcends the boundaries. We've been taught to accept whether the person you think you are represents the totality of what you actually are. Monroe left us with maps, not destinations, techniques, not certainties. His greatest gift wasn't proving that consciousness survives death. It was demonstrating that consciousness might be far stranger, far more powerful, and far more interconnected than we ever imagined. You are not the same consciousness that started. This video, whether you believe Monroe's claims or dismiss them as elaborate fantasy, you've been exposed to concepts that expand the boundaries of possibility. You've considered that your struggles might be curriculum, that your dreams might be communications, that your death might be graduation. Even if you consciously reject everything we've explored, some part of your awareness will forever carry the question, what if he was right? That question will color your dreams, influence your interpretation of synchronicities, and perhaps, when you're ready, guide you toward your own explorations. For the sleepers. If this fascinated you, if it sparked something that feels like remembering, rather than learning, you need to see what I discovered about the Tibetan Book of the Dead's consciousness projection techniques. That video drops next week, and the connections to Monroe's discoveries will blow your mind. For the bridge consciousnesses, use Etheric Codex to share your own out-of-body experiences, your Monroe Institute stories, your consciousness expansion, breakthroughs. The community that's forming around these videos is unlike anything I've seen. People are having spontaneous experiences just from watching. For the initiates, you know there's more. The Monroe material we couldn't include in this video, the classified techniques, the entity contact protocols, the graduation preparation methods, all of it's in the extended research I'm dropping for channel members next Tuesday. Smash that like button. If Monroe's discoveries changed how you see reality, the algorithm rewards engagement, and the more this spreads, the more people discover they're not alone in their consciousness explorations. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, because next week's deep dive into ancient Egyptian consciousness projection will make Monroe's techniques look elementary. We're going deeper into the mystery, and you won't want to miss what I found in those tomb inscriptions. Comment below with your biggest takeaway. Was it the harvest protocol, the pre-birth agreements, the silver cord revelation? I read every comment, and the discussions in this community consistently blow my mind with insights I never considered. For the next 72 hours, pay attention to your dreams, your synchronicities, your moments of expanded awareness. Monroe claimed that exposure to this information activates dormant consciousness capabilities. Document what happens. Share it in the comments. This video contains multiple layers of information designed to activate different aspects of consciousness. Monroe's own research showed that repeat exposure to consciousness-expanding content creates cumulative effects. Each viewing reveals details you missed before. But here's what Monroe never fully revealed, what he discovered in Focus 35, a level so deep he only accessed it once, just days before his death. His final journal entry contains a single sentence that his family chose not to include in any publication. The consciousness that returns from the deepest exploration is not the same one that began the journey. What did Monroe become in that final exploration, and why did those closest to him say he seemed different in his final days? The cord was never meant to be severed. It was meant to be recognized for what it truly is, not a limitation, but a lifeline to the greatest adventure consciousness can undertake. Monroe didn't teach us how to escape reality. He taught us how to remember what reality actually is. The mysterious book was never hidden. We were. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and remember, you are far more than you appear to be.